I want to welcome everyone this evening. We are really honored to have a very special guest at the Reincarnation Book Club tonight. Thank you for being so available to us. When I saw your interview on a podcast, I said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'm going to just ask, and so you responded right away, and here we are. And I just cannot thank you enough for your openness and for everything that you have done for your spiritual path and for the collective spiritual path, because that seems to be a mission throughout your life.
It definitely has been.
Yes, and so I want to welcome Stephen Simon. And some of you may know his name, at least his work, because he has been very, very active. Not long as an attorney, though, I understand. I thought that was so cute. But in the movie production business, if you remember the movie Somewhere in Time, one of my all-time favorites for Reincarnation, and then really at the top of the list, What Dreams May Come is probably number one for me. And then Stephen has also been involved with Conversations with God, the movie, Indigo, the movie about the Indigo children. And he's written another book, The Force is With You. But tonight we're going to be talking about what dreams have come. And to give you a little bit of background, I'll ask Stephen to share why that particular name for that title and the inspiration for the book.
Sure. Anyway, it's nice to see everybody. Thank you, Carol. I love talking about this book, which has been such a miraculous journey in my life. The title of the book, title of the book came from a dinner that I had. Well, I should go back for those of you who have not read the book. On January 3rd, 2018, I went to the gym early, which I always used to do, came home, kind of peeked into our bedroom to see how my wife was doing. Usually she was up by 8 o'clock. That morning she was not, but I knew she'd been up later than me the night before. I got busy, and then around 10 o'clock I got worried, and I came in and found she had transitioned in her sleep. That was, without a question, the most horrid morning of my life. And it began a long period of grief, which I know many, if not all of you, have been through at some point or another, and maybe in now. And as we have all learned, grief is not something you deal with and then it goes away and it's never around anymore. You know, it's not the flu. Grief is always there. And I have learned that the journey of life is not to try to put the grief behind me, but to try to learn and live with it, and understand that it is going to be around. And there are times that I am still like on my knees sobbing from nowhere. I can see a couple walking down the street and holding hands, and I will fall apart. It happens. Anyway, to get back to the story. So that was January of 2018. In September of that year, I went to Ashland. I live just south of Portland, Oregon. I went to Ashland, which is about a 4-hour drive south of here, to meet with my dear friend and brother from another mother, Neil Donald Walsh, who wrote the Conversations with God books. And Neil and I have been really close friends for about 25 years. There was a moment during the process of my grief, and I talked to Neil when I called him one night, and I was just sobbing. I couldn't get anything out of my mouth. And he was very patient. And he said to me, I was so distraught that I said, Neil, I'm out of my mind with grief. And in his typical way, he said, You know, that's a very good thing, Stephen. I'm very glad to hear that, because you need to be out of your mind and in your heart. And he was 100% right. It took about 6 weeks for Lauren to find her way back to me. We had talked a lot about this period of time. Lauren was, still is, an extraordinary intuitive. And she would have people call her from literally all over the world or get in touch with her. And she was extraordinary with it. And I tell you, living with an intuitive is a very interesting situation. Hey, honey, have you heard from your friend Michael in a while? No. Well, I think he's about to call. Phone rings. It's very interesting for those of you who haven't had that experience to live with an intuitive. Anyway, so Neil said you need to be in your heart. Lauren contacted me. We talk about that moment in the book. And I started making notes about our conversations. And they were really just for me to have a diary of it, because I was reeling, and I knew that I wouldn't remember a lot of that time. So I started writing everything down. And the conversations began slowly, and then they picked up with how much time we spent communicating. People have asked me, how does that happen? For me, it happens because I feel Lauren's voice in my heart. I do not hear her voice. Lauren was cremated. That voice is a part of her body that is no longer here on this plane. But I feel her in my heart, and I feel the words. It's very difficult for people who haven't experienced that to understand. I know what I'm saying. But I can tell you, since we published the book, I've literally received hundreds of emails from people from all over the world. And I mean all over the world: Lebanon, Norway, Thailand, all over the world, who are having this experience. I know that literally millions of people are having this experience. And it certainly saved me. So getting back to how the title of the book came about. So went down to Ashland. It's important for everyone to know that at that point, Ashland was in a terrible drought, hadn't had rain in months and months and months. So I met Neil and his terrific wife, Em, at a restaurant that we used to go to when I used to live in Ashland, which I did for a few years, a long time ago, before I met Lauren. And we started talking. Now I'm facing the windows of the restaurant. They are sitting across from me in a booth. So their backs are to the windows. So we start talking, and Neil said, so what are you doing? And I said, you know, Neil, I've been making notes on a yellow pad. And I started to laugh because I did produce and direct the film based on Conversations with God. And I know that's how Neil made his notes when his conversations began. And I said, I'm doing what you did. I'm making notes, and all of a sudden I have like 10 pads of notes. And I thought it was going to be a diary, but I actually think it's going to be a book, Neil. At that very moment, there was a lightning strike outside the window. Not outside the window, but outside. A very bright one. And then a big clap of thunder, and everybody turned around and looked, and Neil looked around and he said, okay, it does need to be a book, and I think I know what the title is. It should be called What Dreams Have Come. Another lightning strike. Now we're like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is a pretty extraordinary moment. We had 2 more moments like that. I said to him, you know, well, obviously it's going to be a book. And I think Lauren and I are supposed to write this together. Another lightning strike. That was an extraordinary evening. And when I got quiet and I could go and be with Lauren, that is when we started to write the book together. And often I was taking dictation from her. I have gone, when we finished the book, I went back and revised certain things about the book, but I never revised any of her words. Her words, and a dear friend of mine suggested that we put her words in a different font than anything else so that they would stand out. And everything that, if you do read the book, everything in there is exactly the way Lauren communicated it to me. And I realized at that point that we needed to get this out into the world. So we self-published it on Amazon, which for anyone who is thinking of doing that, I highly, highly recommend it. It is a wonderful process that they have. It is, once you get it all loaded up to Amazon, which is, I could never do in a million years because I'm not tech savvy, let's put it that way. Once you get your book on Amazon and it's there, they are fabulous. I mean, you can check every day and see, how many sales are going on and things like that. And I also included in the book, and I've done it on every podcast that I've done, and I'll do it here today too. I included an email address, which is my personal email, for people who have had these experiences, who want to share them with me. And what I've said to everyone is that, and I've received hundreds of those. I've responded to everyone. I will respond to everyone, because it's very important that we understand that the way we saw the veil between this life and what happens after this life, the way we've seen that has been changing. And so many people that I know who are in this spiritual world have felt that, have seen that. There are things that are changing all of the time. In my, as we develop our replacements with AI, which I will never in a million years understand why we're doing, but we are. I think it's very important that people have these communications and be able to talk about them, because, of course, a lot of people, when I say this, think that I'm several tacos short of a combination plate. And while that may be, and generally probably is, because you do have to be a little crazy to be a film producer. And I saw some of you have a response when Carol mentioned Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come. There's a lot of great stories behind Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come. And if you want me to tell you any of them, I'll be more than happy to do that as we move forward in this hour. So that's what happened. We published the book, and the response has been really wonderful. And I'm really glad, because is it a mainstream book? Heck no. I'm not drawn to mainstream. When I got into the film industry, the first, it's a long story, which I'm not going to get into, but when I did, I begged my way into a job with a producer. And the first film I ever championed was Smokey and the Bandit, which we got made at Universal. That was a very commercial mainstream film. Other than that, I'm not really drawn to those films. I'm not drawn to mass audience films. None of the films that I've made that I'm proud of, and I've made some that I'm not so proud of, have all been spiritually oriented, and they are not mainstream movies. They are movies that appeal to particular audiences. Somewhere in Time, there's a fan club for Somewhere in Time that has been going now for 30 years, and they publish a newsletter 3 times a year about things with the people in the film and things like that. At Mackinac Island, where we shot the film, every October, the entire Grand Hotel is taken over by fans of the film. There's a Somewhere in Time weekend, and people come dressed in 1912 costumes. They bring trunks of clothes so that they can actually experience what Jane and Chris did. Those are the things that actually really, really matter to me. And that's how the book came out there. And that's really why I'm here today. And when Carol said, do you want to do this? I said, sure, because I love talking about this. And there may be just one of you that feels something from this, that gets something from this. And to me, that's more than worthwhile. So that's a much longer answer than you probably needed, Carol, but that's how the book came about.
That is a fascinating story. I'm sure everyone agrees. And the thing that I was interested in also is, so we have this parallel between what dreams may come and now what dreams have come. And what I was wondering is if Lauren has described to you what she experiences in her world.
In some ways, yes. In ways that I am capable with my human guys on to understand, yes. But I will tell you, and this is a great question, and I want to address it directly because this may ruffle some feathers, and if it does, I apologize. But Lauren and I, when we met and we decided to get together, when we first saw each other in a movie theater in a little town called Gresham, Oregon. When we first saw each other, we literally stood there and just stared at each other for about 20 seconds. It seemed like 10 minutes. We didn't say anything. We just looked at each other. And we talked about it later that we kind of had the feeling of, oh my goodness, we found each other when we were supposed to. Us getting to that theater that night was a miracle. There was no way that should have happened, that she and I should have been in that theater at the same time in our lives, but we did. And we had, talk about reincarnation, we've been around together for a long time. And we went through a lot of those realizations while Lauren was still physical, most of them. And how many times we had been together. During that time that we had, the 13 years that we had together from the time we met, is that correct? 2003 and 14 years. We talked about this a lot and about what the quote afterlife unquote is about. Those of you who have seen What Dreams May Come know that the world into which Robin proceeded after he transitioned was a world of wet paint, because that was the medium that his wife painted in, and it's where he felt comfortable. A dog that they had been that had been theirs for a long time was there to greet him, and that was his life. His wife, however, in taking her own life, and boy, did we ever get a lot of grief for that. His wife, in taking her own life, was in a different place. And I have had people be in touch with me and tell me, one person once said at a party to me, oh, you produced What Dreams May Come? Yes. Well, I saw that film with a friend of mine who said, if you ever find anybody from the film, will you please give them a message for me? And I thought, okay, great, here it comes. And I said, yeah, sure, go ahead. And he said, really nice guy. He said, she wants you to know that you are an inhuman monster. And then he paused just a perfect amount of time and said, I hope you don't take that personally. Well, before I even asked him, I knew exactly why. Because he said, her dad committed suicide, and she was so outraged in your movie that you basically made the point that everyone who takes their own life goes to hell. Well, if you watch the movie and you watch it carefully, we take great pains not to say that.
Right.
And the explanation that Cuba gives to Robin is that, of course you were. We want you to be comfortable. Everybody chooses their own thing here. And that is the way Robin and that's the way Lauren and I have always seen the afterlife, that it would be a reflection of our beliefs, that it's not one size fits all. It isn't. There's a wonderful writer named Thomas, I think it's Thomas Monroe, I forget, or maybe it's Robert Monroe, said that in the afterlife, we can exist on islands of mutually conceptual realities. And that is why then I talk to my friends who are deeply religious. And my closest friend is a evangelical Christian who doesn't in any way believe any of the things that I believe, and I don't believe a lot of the things that he believes. We talk about this, and I have said to him, so here's what I don't understand. We have, I don't know, 12, 15 major religions in the world, probably, and hundreds, if not thousands, of offshoots of those religions. They all have a different concept of God, or Allah, or Buddha, or whoever it might be, they all have a very different concept about what happens after death, if anything. So we have all of these things on this planet, and what you're saying to me, my Christian friends who have that a particular belief is, yeah, but everybody's going to be wrong except for us. It's a very cruel way of looking at life. Because, and I've said to him, well, I don't understand. If God created everything, why would God create all these other religions and give people hope and stuff like that? And then when life is over, they're all a lie. I don't believe it. This is again, a long-winded way of me saying the answer to your question, Carol. Lauren went into trance one night in April of 2017. It was about 10 months before she passed. And she said, honey, we need to design our afterlife together. And she never remembered when she would come out of trance what had happened during it. And she said, you got to write all this down. So I wrote it down, and we had a very specific vision of our afterlife, which I am not going to share because it's very personal, and I don't want to put that out into the world. I just don't. There are certain things I don't talk about, and that's one of them. But that is where Lauren exists. I know she has very specific work that she does. I know that she works with people who are still very human. I am by far and away her toughest project, I'm sure. And she is always there when I need her. It is an extraordinary relationship. And when I talk to people who are not completely into this, a lot of them think I'm completely crazy. And they say to me, how do you know? How do you know you're not just making this up? And my answer for that is very simple. Look, my heart is 100% certain that I'm not making anything up. My brain is 99 9/10% certain, but I can't lie and say that I 100% know this is true, because it's faith, it's belief. This is something that we all have a different interpretation of. I know in my heart that all of these things that happen, and again, because I'm getting so much communication from people everywhere that they're sharing this, I know that this is an experience that millions of people are having. We wrote the book not to appeal to people, not to try to convince anybody of anything, not to appeal to people who don't agree, not to try to change people's minds. I learned through 45 years as a film producer, making Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come and Conversations with God and Indigo. And then we operated the Spiritual Cinema Circle for 16 years, in which we send out films to people 4 films a month for 16 years that were all spiritually uplifting. I know these are not so-called mainstream things, and they probably never will be, and who cares? Okay, I have a great respect. My nephew is a very successful executive in the film industry. He runs one of the biggest financing companies in the business. They spend over $1 billion a year on films. And he's the president of the company. He got his start because he wanted to come to Mackinac Island and see what his uncle was doing when I was doing Somewhere in Time. He's become wildly successful. They make huge mainstream movies. They make all the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movies. They made Maverick. That's his world. My world is for a smaller world of people who have certain beliefs, and that's who the book is for. It's a love story, and I know that everybody can extrapolate their own feelings from it, and I hope they do. And that's really as much as I can tell you about how Lauren and I communicate, and what she has let me know about the other side. And she's also let me know that a lot of that stuff just needs to remain between us. Because again, it may not be what you experience. You know, it may not be. It may be completely different from your experience.
That's a really, really good point. It's what I have also experienced as a medium, and I'm really glad you brought up about the the comment about the suicide experience, the experience that she had as a suicide person on the other side. Gosh, the way you all handled that was absolutely stunning. And that has impacted me as a medium who works with a lot of people who are friends or loved ones of someone who's committed suicide. Remembering that part about where Robin Williams said to her, "Thank you for all of the different things." That really had a big impact on me, you know, as I'm working with those beings also. So thank you for bringing all of those up. You're tuning in to all the things I want to ask. I don't want to hog the questions. So if anyone in the group has a question that they're burning to ask, please raise your hand, unmute yourself. And I know we've got some questions.
I will.
Yeah,
Hi.
good, John.
First, for those who haven't read the book, it is a love story, and it is very moving. And as Carol said, I felt I got to know you as you told your story, and specifically, I've got a little thing. This looks like it's italicized, but it doesn't sound like it was from Lauren. It says, accepting the underlying premise that everything around us is an illusion certainly explains why Lauren's transition never felt real to me, or Peggy or others, because it isn't indeed real in the real world, only in this illusion that we call the real world.
Yeah,
And
you're right.
that is
in italics, but that's not Lauren. You're right. That is not Lauren. That's me.
Yeah. So let me hear you talk to that.
Wow. How long have you got? So the Wachowski brothers, who created the Matrix series of films, brilliant people. Brilliant. I mean, really visionary, brilliant people. They made the Matrix because they became fascinated with the work that has been going on in quantum physics now for the last 10 or 15 years about, is this world that we walk around in the real world? And this is the best sentence I have read about this yet. What if life is the dream, and when we die, we wake up? Now, that is a fascinating, incredibly controversial point of view. And they knew they could not get anybody to make a movie about that. So they decided to hide that in a big action movie with tons of special effects and things like that. But the point of doing The Matrix was to do that. And I personally find that incredibly fascinating. Because for those of us who do believe in reincarnation, who know that we have been around for a while in different guises and different things, how does that work? How actually can that work? How does this whole thing about our humanity and how we've learned more about each other, and how we have actually begun to embrace more of the ideas that maybe this isn't everything? It is a fascinating thing. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? We don't know these answers. We don't know these questions. I mean, we know the questions, we don't know the answers. But I personally find that fascinating because I am having a regular communication with my wife, who is on the other side. And she has found a way to communicate with me that I can actually feel her voice. I hear her laughter, even though it isn't physical. She still teases me mercilessly, which is what we spent most of our marriage doing. And I loved every single second of it. And I love it now. How does that work why is that not the real world or a separate world? I don't know the answers to these questions. I find them completely, utterly fascinating. And we will know when we get to the other side. But the answer to your question is, we're not the only ones, John, that are asking these questions. These questions are being asked all over the world, and they're being asked by some very serious scientific people as well. And there's a lot of thought that maybe that is true. We'll see. I don't know. I just find the question fascinating.
Well, I could, yes, absolutely. I'm reminded of the John Lennon song, Dream Number 9, is just a dream. Does any of this really happen? But I think my perspective is that everything is really nothing. If you think about energy and the construction of reality, most of it is space, just emptiness. And the illusion gets created, but the illusion is very real, obviously. That's the whole game of it, that we fall prey to the illusion. But I was thinking some of this can be philosophical, metaphysical, up there. And a real human level, I imagine this way of thinking about the world has helped you to cope with the passing of someone that you were deeply in love with. The idea that all of this is simply, I call it spiritual kindergarten, just an illusion. That's enough for me.
I had those feelings 40 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. One of the reasons that I spent 20 years of my life, and it did take 20 years, one of the reasons that it took me 20 years to get What Dreams May Come made, is that is very much at the center of What Dreams May Come. And what happens to us after we pass is very much at that center. And in the beginning, Robin thinks that he's making all of this up as well. Cuba has an enormous burden to bear in his role that he played in that film, in that he has to be the explainer of everything. And when he pushes open the window to that world and says, we all create our own world. You're the first guy I know that did it with wet paint. That was not a throwaway line. And the actual getting the film made itself was a miracle. That is not an easy film for people to sit through. There's a sequence early on in the movie when the two children die in a car crash, and Robin gets up in a church in front of two small coffins and gives the eulogy for his kids. And when we shot that scene, Robin took pictures of his own kids up on the lectern, so that when he gave that, he really was imagining it. He was giving it to his own children. We previewed that movie a lot to audiences. I mean, a lot. Because there were so many things in it that we wanted to find out how audiences were responding. Every time we previewed that movie and we had that scene, and I think, again, it's in the first 10 minutes, at least 10 or 15 people got up and walked out of the theater because it was just too difficult for them to watch. It does deal with suicide. The way that all came about is because Richard Matheson, who wrote the novel that What Dreams May Come is based on, it's probably one of the few, if not the only, novels that I can remember that actually has a bibliography. Because Richard did exhaustive research all over the world with the whole feeling of people when they have a near-death experience, seeing the light, feeling that they're in some kind of tunnel on their way to something, having loved ones surround them and reconnect with them, and that there's a feeling of incredible peace and everything else. Richard found that basically every culture in the world has some version of that, but also people who have tried to take their own lives and then are revived come back with a different story. And it's not as pretty. It's a lot more challenging. That is how that all came about. And as I said, you do it, what we call the elevator pitch in this movie. Well, it's about this couple who really love each other a lot, and their children are killed in a car crash, and the wife tries to take her own life, and the only reason that she stays around is because of her love of her husband. And then he dies in a car crash. She decides she can't handle it anymore, takes her own life. She goes to a different place in the afterlife than he does, and he literally has to descend through the pit of, quote, hell, unquote, to find her and help retrieve her soul. Try pitching that to a Hollywood executive, okay? That it is not an easy thing to do. And we all, I mean, again, it would take hours to describe all the things we went through in those 20 years of trying to get that film made. I'll tell you a cute story, though. When we got Robin, well, when we hoped we had Robin, the financing entity that made the film said, we'll make this movie with 2 people and only 2 people, Tom Hanks or Robin Williams. This is 1997, 96 when we started, 96. And Tom Hanks was committed to a couple of other films, and we sent the script out to Robin. And I got a call from the studio saying, hey, you and Vincent, who is the director of the film, you guys need to go to San Francisco because Robin wants to meet with you. We knew Robin was not going to meet with us, have us come up there to say, I don't want to do your movie. So we flew to San Francisco. We walked into his house to meet him. And the first thing Robin said is, hey, guys, just so you know, I am going to do this movie. This is going to be my next movie. And by the way, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I really don't care. I'm going to play every part in the movie. And of course, we laughed, and that because that was typical Robin Williams. It was a journey, and our crew would not go into that church. A lot of them would not go in. The preview audiences that we had were people loved that film or they just despised it. And there was very little in between. And to me, that's art. I would rather make a film that people are very, very split in their feelings because it shows that they're feeling something, rather than to have somebody say, hey, it was pretty good. I don't want to spend 20 years of my life trying to get a film made that people think is pretty good. I'd rather have them love it or hate it, and that is certainly the case with Dreams. There are a lot of other stories about Dreams, but
you reminded me that when it came out here in Richmond, Virginia, and Richmond is kind of a conservative area, and it did not get good reviews in the newspaper.
No, it didn't.
But I was so upset by the review that I wrote a rebuttal. And I said, clearly, the person who did the review knows nothing about metaphysics. And my rebuttal got published.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
I completely forgot about that until you were talking just now. So I wanted you to know that, yep, I came to your defense.
I'll tell you a cute story about the reviews. So when I was in college, way back in the dark ages, I became very friendly. I was going to the University of Pennsylvania, and I became very friendly with a guy who was going to Yale named, oh my God, I was going to say Gene Shalit. Gene Siskel, who, as you know, became a very, very famous critic, Siskel and Ebert.
Oh, yeah.
And when Gene became a critic, and I got into the film industry right around the same time, I thought to myself, well, I'm always going to get one good review. Gene then proceeded to rip apart every single movie I made. He hated Somewhere in Time. He hated All the Right Moves. He hated everything I did. I saw him after one preview, and I said, Gene, are you ever going to give me a good review? And he said, are you ever going to make a good movie? This kept going on. Excuse me. We lost track of each other. And when the studio got the reviews from Siskel and Ebert for What Dreams May Come, the head of marketing called me right away, and he said, you have got to hear this review that Gene Siskel gave to the movie. And he read it to me, and Gene called it one of the greatest achievements in film history. I tried to find him. I did find him, and I found out from his wife that he was at that point dying of brain cancer. And when he saw the film, he knew he was dying. And I will always believe that Gene saw his future and really related to what happened. And to me, that was like the only thing that mattered to me is that at the end, he saw something that comforted him. And I'm glad that people are comforted by dreams and not frightened by it, because a lot of people are frightened by it. The same thing happened with Somewhere in Time. Took 3 years to get made. But the same issue happened with Somewhere in Time. You know, it's about a guy who wills himself back in time. And as my nephew, who I love dearly, who runs Skydance, as I told you, always says to me, Stephen, where did the watch start? Have any of you seen Somewhere in Time?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so where did the watch start? You know, she hands it to him, he hands it to her, she hands it to him. It has to start somewhere. And my answer to him is, yeah, because the writer and I came up with this answer. I'll tell you exactly where it starts. It starts somewhere in time. You're looking at the movie as logic. It's not logic. This is a love story. This is a passionate love story about people who found each other through time and who are together again at the end. You can't watch it with your head. So to me, that is what I have been doing in my career. I'm 77 now. I'm not producing movies anymore. There's no way I actually have the physical energy to do that anymore. That's something that is behind me. But I am helping other people, a couple of other people, and I do have one other film that I'm hoping will happen in the future. Anyway, I've talked too much. Does anybody else have anything they want to ask me or say, any comment you want to make about Somewhere in Time or dreams? I've only got another 10 minutes here with you guys, and I'd love to have anybody else ask a question or make a comment if you want, or tell me I'm crazy.
Well, I would just like to thank you for this. I have always been fascinated with the afterlife and time travel and Richard Matheson's books. And my husband also passed in 2018, so I've gotten into it even more.
I'm sorry.
So thank you. So every thing that you're saying just resonates with me. And I just want to tell you that.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Well, Richard Matheson was my spiritual mentor. He was the most extraordinary man. Richard wrote the book that Somewhere in Time was based on. He wrote the book that What Dreams May Come was based on. He wrote movies like I Am Legend, The Incredible Shrinking Man. He wrote about a third of the Twilight Zone episodes. He's one of the great fantasy writers.
Yes.
Even King credits Richard Matheson with his career. I would have never had a writing career if it hadn't been for Richard. Richard was an extraordinary man, a really, truly extraordinary man. So I miss him dearly, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because he really took me under his wing and explained spirituality to me, which it took me a while. Anybody else have anything they want to bring up?
So I have a question about something that you said in the book.
Yeah.
And I've heard a few other people say this. I wonder what your thoughts are about it, why it is important to you. It was about that you feel this is yours and Lauren's last incarnation on Earth. That's the burning question I left reading your book about. So if you have an answer.
I do. Again, before Lauren passed, we talked about this quite a lot. We have not been together in every lifetime, and we have had different roles in different lifetimes. But we have been doing this dance for a couple of millennia. It's a long time. We have had literally dozens of lives together. And again, there is something that happens that a spiritual teacher of mine once described it this way. When you're between lives and you decide you're going to come back, imagine that you go out to a running track. And as you go around the track, you set up the hurdles and the obstacles that you feel you need to deal with in your next life. It's you doing it, you and your higher self and your angels or whatever. It's you doing it. It's you setting up your life. So you go all the way around the track, excuse me, you set up all these hurdles and these obstacles, and then you're born. And of course, you forget all that. And then you start your life and you start your way around that track. And you often get very irritated at the idiot that set up all the hurdles too close together and too high. And why did I have to deal with that, right? We, in our discussions before she transitioned, realized that we had set this life up in a way in which we could do certain things within this life that would then allow us, excuse me, to be on the other side and not come back. And it's a feeling that we both had for a very, very long time. That will last. And that, as I've said to our kids, look, the first 100, 150, 200 quote years, I plan to do nothing other than hug Lauren. So that's it. She's going to be in a century-long hug. Then we can talk about other things. And we're not coming back. That is, of course, unless Lauren decides we are, and then we will. You know, that's life. And that's being married. And if we do, we do. But we both have a very strong feeling that this is the last time around. We may be wrong. She now knows a lot better than I do because she's there and I'm not. But that has been our plan. And it was our plan before she transitioned.
What a great answer. It just opens us all up to the field of possibilities, doesn't it?
It is. That which you think becomes your world.
Absolutely.
You know, that it is something that we passionately believe in. And it's something that I feel that we all experience when we go through these lives together. And, you know, you meet somebody and you realize that they're a part of your soul group, and you kind of go back with connections and things like that. A friend of mine was driving through New Mexico where she'd never been before, and got to a small town. There was one traffic light. She was stopped at the traffic light. There was nobody else driving on the street. It was the middle of the day. And a young guy with a backpack starts walking across the street in front of her. And she looks at him and he looks at her, and he stares at her all the way around, and she stares at him. And he comes up to the window and she said, "Stephen, I wasn't even the tiniest bit afraid. I just put the window down." And he leaned in and he said, "Hi." And she said, "Hi." And then he said to her, "We're only supposed to say hello this time. So that was it. Have a great life." And he walked off.
Wow.
When those things happen, and she said to me, "I knew this guy. I knew him. I absolutely knew him, and he knew me." As Shakespeare says, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamed of in your philosophy, and this is one of them.
Yes. Now tell us how to get in touch with you. You have a website.
Yes, the website is really just, it's whatdreamshavecome.com. But if anyone wants to email me about their own experiences here, as I said, give me some time. I work on this every day, and sometimes for several hours every day. And I will respond to you, I promise. It's Stephen, STEPHEN, at whatdreamshavecome.com. Again, it's Stephen, STEPHEN, at whatdreamshavecome.com. I make you a couple of promises. I promise I will respond, and I promise that no one will ever see these emails other than me. This is something that I have promised everyone. Some of the stories that I have been privy to have just made me weep. It's not hard to make me weep. Our kids have a joke in our family. Dad even cries at card tricks. And it's probably not that much of an exaggeration. I'll be more than happy to receive the email, and I will in any way I can, and I will definitely respond to it, as I said.
Well, thank you so much again for sharing your story. I know it's touching many, many lives, and you certainly have touched not only our lives, our hearts, and And it just feels like we're all part of one big journey. One beautiful gathering on this physical earth. And who knows, maybe we'll reconnect on the other side as a big soul group reunion. So,
Yeah, I have said to a number of people that have emailed me about this is that, well, maybe we'll double date on the other side. We'll bring the wine.
Great. Well, thank you again. If we can have everybody unmute and give Stephen a big hand.
You
Yes,
can wait.
thank you so much.
Or you can wave. Thank you so much, Stephen. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, and thank all of you. And I wish you all well. And I wish you a lot of love and a lot of happiness.
Thank
Same
you
to
so
you.
much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.